Princess Te Puea Herangi, CBE, was a Maori leader from New Zealand's Waikato region known by the name Princess Te Puea. Her mother, Tiahuia, was the elder sister of King Mahuta. Early life. She was born at Whatiwhatiho, near Pirongia in the Waikato, daughter of Te Puea Herangi and Tiahuia. Te Puea Herangi was the son of William Nicholas Shrank, an English surveyor. Tiahuia was daughter, by his principal wife, of the second Maori king, Te As the eventual successor to her grandfather, she was educated in the traditional Maori ways. At age 12 she began attending Mercer Primary School and then went on to attend Mangere Bridge School and Melmley College in Parnell. She was fluent in speaking and writing Maori, and she could speak English, but her written English was very poor. During her teenage years she was often very sick. She lived a wild and promiscuous life. She was given a Riki status and developed an arrogant and demanding personality, and was often in conflict with her family and whānau over her many partners such as Tom Paikea, Paraira Harry Winnie, Roy Seacombe, Te Tahi Wikau, Rauiri Katipa, and her drunken bickering, a lifestyle she later came to bitterly regret. She was unable to have children. In her 20s, Te Puea settled at Mongatawhiri and began dairy farming. She began collecting and recording waiata, whakapapa, and Carrero tawhito from her extended family. Leadership role. When her mother died in 1898, Te Puea returned home reluctantly at the age of 15, supposedly to take her mother's place. However, being young and believing also that she was dying of tuberculosis, she rejected the traditional role expected of her and cut herself off from her people. This phase passed, and in 1911 she returned to her people and resumed her hereditary role. Her first task, the one that re-established her mana among her people, was to successfully campaign on behalf of Maui Pomeri in his election bid to become the Kingitanga Member of Parliament. Te Puea later fell out with Pomeri because he supported Maori soldiers fighting for New Zealand overseas. Te Puea worked against this behind Pomeri's back. He became aware of her attitude and in the winter of 1918 attended an anti-conscription hui called by Te Puea, where he was roundly abused by all the elders of the Kingitanga. Te Puea's support base was mainly with the lower Waikato tribes. Initially she was a minor figure for upriver iwi such as Maniapoto. Because of Waikato's anti-government stance on conscription during WW1 and Te Puea's personal involvement in hiding conscripts, she was not a popular figure with government or local Pakeha after WW1. Because of the German background of her father, Te Puea was often accused of being a traitor. After WW1, farmers were reluctant to offer Kingites work, and during the royal visit of the Prince of Wales, the Kingites' desire to host the prince was snubbed, in favour of an Arawa visit which was open to all Maori to attend. Arawa had been selected as they had the experience and facilities to host a large Maori occasion. They were an iwi that had remained loyal to the government, taking an active part against the Kingites in the land wars and playing a full role in WW1. Achievements. She was soon acknowledged as one of the leaders of the Kingitanga movement and worked to make it part of the central focus of the Maori people. She also began farming at Mongatawhiri. Te Puea was firmly opposed to conscription when it was introduced in 1917 and provided a refuge at her farm for those who refused to be conscripted into the New Zealand Army. Following the influenza epidemic of 1918, she took under her wing some 100 orphans, who were the founding members of the community of Turongawarewi at Ngaruawahia. It was through Turongawarewi that Te Puea began to extend her influence beyond the Waikato region. The construction of its carved meeting house was strongly supported by Sir Api Rana Nata and the Ngāti Porou people. She she became friendly with the Prime Minister, Sir Gordon Coates, who was raised in a rural community where many Maori live, and with journalist Eric Ramsden, who publicised her tours and the development of the Kingitanga base at Turongawarewe. Coates was keen to lift Waikato Maori out of the sullen depression by addressing land grievances. Coates had been shocked at the conditions in which Waikato Maori lived, calling them the poorest people he had seen in his life. It was through her friendship with Ramsden that articles about her and her work began to appear in the national newspapers. In these she was usually identified as Princess Te Puea, a title that she herself deplored, saying that the role of princess does not exist in Maori Tonga. Pomeri pointed out that neither does king. During 1913 and 1914, the Maori community suffered a smallpox epidemic. The main problem was that many of them believed that disease was a punishment from displeased spirits, and refused to go to Pakeha hospitals. In response, Te Puea set up a small settlement of nikau huts devoted to nursing people back to health. This was successful, as not one person died, and the isolation of the village largely prevented spread of disease. Te Puea's main drive was to establish Turongawarewe as a base for the Kingitanga, but she was always short of funds. In 1922 she decided to raise money for her ambitious building program by starting a Maori concert party called Te Puea.Her. Choosing this name, she hoped to remind the Pakeha of the war and the confiscations. TPM, as it was known, travelled around New Zealand performing haka poi dances, Hawaiian hula dances, with steel guitars, mandolins, banjos and ukuleles. In a 3-month tour, the group saved £900, which was used to build a new kitchen dining room. Te Puea restarted the Kingitanga taxation scheme, whereby all Kingitanga supporters were required to pay levies to support Kingitanga programs. This was commonly called the whitebait levy. At other times, Te Puea levied every supporter for an additional donation of 2/6. Te Puea was known to keep meticulous records of these finances. Tour of the East Coast and controversy over gifted farm. During her tour of the East Coast in the late 1930s, Te Puea visited Ngāti Porou Marau, where, to her surprise, she was accepted. Despite her links to the King movement, which Ngāti Porou had always despised for its isolation and backwardness, for her part Te Puea was surprised at the affluence that Ngāti Porou enjoyed, as well as their acceptance of European lifestyle. The East Coast tour was a great success and raised more money for Turongawarewe buildings. Following this, she was invited to Wellington to take part in a wide range of official and social arrangements. Te Puea used the contacts she had made, especially with Maori MP Ngāta, to further her development of the Kingitanga base. She was able to acquire from the government a block of land near the meeting house for growing vegetables, increased pensions and a local post box. The PM also gave her a 200-acre farm and built her a house, plus a gift of £1,000 for farm development, as well as subsidizing a Maori workers' hostel in Tuakau. Coates said this was given in recognition of her work for Waikato orphans and the poor, but also to consolidate her political support at a time the Ratana Church was becoming a major and threatening political force. Ngāta gave Te Puea government loans and another 300-acre block to grow food to support the Kingitanga. This farm needed a developer, and an experienced Pakeha farmer paid for by the government was appointed supervisor. Ngāta fired him and replaced him with Te Puea. She was given a car so she could move around the 3 farms. Her husband was given another farm at Tikitari in Rotorua. However, concerns were raised in Parliament about how Ngāta was operating and misusing government funds in 1934. This led to an investigation held by a royal commission that found there had been a host of irregularities involving the expenditure of £500,000. Labour leader Robert Semple said that the commission revealed one of the worst specimens of abuse of political power, maladministration and misappropriation of public funds. Ngata resigned. In 1935, she was awarded the King George V Silver Jubilee Medal. Te Puea was appointed a CBE in 1937. Initially she was confused and reluctant to accept the award because of her dealings with the government. The CBE was awarded for her self-sacrificing devotion and stupendous personal efforts and extraordinary capacity for leadership and organization, with a talent for diplomacy in her dealings with other tribes and leaders amongst the Pākehā. She turned idle lands into productive, excellent farms. A year later another carved meeting house was opened by the Governor-General, Lord Galway. 1940s. In 1940 she bought a farm near Ngāruawāhia and began developing it, provide an economic base from the Tūrangawarewa community. It was there that she began teaching the beliefs that would sustain the King movement, work, faith, and pan-Maori unity through the King movement. Te Puea always stressed the importance of iwi over hapu. The government planned nationwide celebrations for the centenary in 1940 of the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, the document that founded modern New Zealand. Initially Te Puea was in favour, but then withdrew her support when the government refused her request that the Maori king be given the same tax status as the Governor-General. At the time she said, reconciliation with Pākehā. Te Puea was raised by people who had fought to resist the government invasion of the Waikato in 1863, and by people who had lived through the bitter years that followed. She had little reason to love or trust Pākehā. However, as time went by she came to see the need for reconciliation. In 1946 Te Puea approached the government to say the tribe would be willing to accept money to compensate for the loss of lands after the defeat of the Kingitanga in 1863. A large meeting was held at Tūrangawarewa in which a wide range of opinions were read. Then the leadership met privately with Fraser the Prime Minister and worked out what would be accepted by the tribe. A deal had already been settled with Taranaki tribes and Waikato were keen to do better. The final deal gave Waikato nearly twice the income of Taranaki. The deal was accepted by Roy Edwards at the urging of Te Puea. After nearly 20 years of negotiation she accepted, on behalf of Tainui, a settlement offered by the Prime Minister, Peter Fraser, of an initial grant of £10,000 and £5,000 a year spread over 40 years. No provision was made for inflation, which at the time was very low. By the time the deal was presented to the tribe the next day, the money had been increased again to £6,000 for 50 years and thereafter £5,000 in perpetuity. She recognized this as an acceptable offer. However, the payment acknowledged that a grievous wrong had been done to her people. Te Puea also built Tūrangawarewa Mara and has a statue of her in front of the house called Mahinarangi. Later years of her life. In the last few years of her life Te Puea fell out with many of the Maori and Pākehā friends who had worked with her for most of her adult life. She became increasingly demanding and unreasonable when she did not get her way. Te Puea died at her home after a long illness. During her lifetime she had raised the profile of the King movement, especially outside of Waikato, and had helped raise the standard of living of Waikato to that of other Maori. Biography by Michael King. In 1974, the historian Michael King, who had worked for the Waikato Times and learned Te Reo Maori, became interested in writing about the famous Kingitanga leader Te Puea. He discovered there was very little written about her and wanted to write about her while the people who knew her at first hand were still alive. King tried to persuade the Maori author Taxation Jones to write the biography, but he refused, saying he knew too much about her. Jones said it would be difficult to write about Te Puea without damaging her reputation. After discussions with the tribe and Dame Te Puea Herangi, it was agreed that King would write her biography. He was given restricted access to many of Te Puea's papers by Alex Mackay, formerly Te Puea's secretary. Mackay said he could not have all the papers as there was too much private and family information that should remain confidential. Many of Te Puea's elderly friends gave valuable time to King. Within a few years, nearly all were dead. After the book was published, some non-Waikato Tainui Maori criticized them for allowing a Pākehā to write about a highly tapu person.